Welcome on in. Welcome on in, Raiders.
Hey.
Hey. What's everybody? Welcome to episode number 220 Donated Organs and Phantom Limb and Phantom Memories. Today we're going to be talking about donor experiences, or not donor experiences, but receiver experiences from donated organs and all the things that come with that. And we're going to be talking about phantom limbs. So if you are into the medical thing, this is going to be the show for you. As always, I am your host, Solomon, as you see right there. And with me over here, this way, this guy right here, that's Spider. He's got his thumb up. I don't know why. He's little Jack Horner.
Just looking for a pie.
Just sticking in like that. I wouldn't like that very much at all. If I had a pie and that little kid tried to do that.
I'll be slapping his hand.
And
Like,
just like a bow. And then he's like, well, you know where your thumb's been. You've been playing in the
Yeah.
dirt. He probably was playing in the dirt. He was a little boy. Little boy's playing in the dirt.
kid stuff.
Children's. Well, it is a cold day in Ohio. There's a lot of these now because it is the end of January. We're jumping into February next week. So we'll be bringing you more of the uncanny goodness. Also, if you know anyone that is good at making intros, let us know. Guide them our way. We're looking for someone to make us a brand new intro.
And an outro, actually.
And an outro.
If we could do an intro and an outro, because then we can have like an end bit rather than the show just stopping every time.
Yes. And this would be nice, but
I meant to make one and I just never got around to it. And at this point, it's kind of like have somebody professional do it.
Right. So, and if not, we'll find somebody. But yeah, so that's what we got. Nothing really new coming up. It's still cold. When it is not cold, there'll be plenty of new action things for you to try with action missiles. So,
Action bills is what we have now.
action bill. That is exactly. That is not a check. That is a bill.
Action
Or-
bills.
So, what's going on in your world, Spider? How are things over in your neck of the woods?
Well, things have been good. Anybody who didn't know, of course, you weren't here last week. So
I was
last
not.
week I did solo and I had a little discussion about UFOs and recent UFO disclosures and things like that. And I did get my fridge for anybody who wonders, because I talked about how I had to get a fridge and I got it. So we're all good on my fridge. I saved my food. And yeah, so there's that. Upcoming stuff. I now have Uncanny Spirits Club stuff stacked up into March. So as soon as February starts coming up, you're going to get an episode every week on Thursday at 9:30 p.m. It'll show up on YouTube and Twitch. And so all through February and into March, and I'll probably keep up with that because I think that's a good plan, scheduling it all ahead of time.
It's a good call. Can't go wrong there. I'll also be hitting you with some things here. So in the coming weeks, I just need to figure out how I want to do it. Maybe get another webcam and go through it that way. So, but yeah, that's well, we got a lot of stuff coming up. I just need the weather to be nice for a few days. Just for a few days. So probably sometime in February when it gets to be like a 50 degree day, I need to go out and take some pictures and videos of how Rogues Hollow actually looks when there's no foliage and there's no tree leaves out. It looks very barren and very small comparatively when you're looking at an entire forest of stuff. So, and maybe I'll take my co-host with me and we can go trudging around. We've done it before, so it's Then it was hot, so now we'll see when it's cold, and then I will edit a bunch of the film together, and we'll have that documentary out to you guys. It'll be on YouTube, Twitch, anywhere where I can put video. Maybe like there's one that begins with a V. It's kind of like YouTube.
Venmo.
Yeah, isn't that
Venmo.
a payment thing though?
No, not Venmo. It's Vivo.
It's something like that.
No, I don't remember. I know what it is, but I can't like the name of it's like
because Venmo I think is the pay.
Venmo's
thing,
with
like
Cash App and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's coming up, and that's about all I have for now. Like I said, we'll be doing more trip-centric things as soon as the weather actually starts getting nice. Because you can't really do much in the wintertime here in Ohio. It's It's cold. I mean,
Mhm.
anything you could do, stay in the house. It really is. Got that. And we'll also be working on some new merchandise. I want to get some merchandise back up again and rolling. Maybe get a couple coffee mugs out there for you coffee drinking
I was
folks.
just looking at our online store too and thinking, we really got to add some more stuff to that. So
Yes.
I know we have I don't know if I made them publicly available yet. We have the black edition of the Uncanny Earth shirts with the logo. They're on there, and I think we have a sticker. We have the stickers that we've had there for the bumper stickers.
Oh yeah.
But I know we need a lot more stuff than just what's on there, and I
Yes.
have been neglecting it, and that was kind of like my area. I should have been doing designs on it for a while, and I just wasn't paying attention. So now I think we're gonna get right back on that and really expand that kind of stuff.
I would definitely like that. So
We have a wave in the chat room.
it's probably Leah. She usually waves.
Yes, it sure is.
That's what I figured. We have one from FB and one from YouTube watching. So,
Cool.
all right. But let's get into it. We're going to just jump right into this, unlike that meme that was left.
People pick on you. They pick on you.
That's okay.
Get those lawyers on retainer.
Told you. Tell me like that again. Hear from my attorney, Tim Misney, because he makes people pay.
That's right.
So when we're talking about cellular memory, we must first understand what an actual cell is. And by definition, it's the smallest unit that can live on its own and that makes up all living organisms and the tissues of the body. It's got three parts: the cell membrane, the nucleus, and the cytoplasm. So those are the basic constructs of a cell. Then you have the DNA aspect of everything, because everybody is linked via DNA. And I know this because recently I had my DNA checked, actually. And it was surprising. I mean, I know I was English and German. I can go back on the family tree and figure that one out. But I did not know I was Scottish, Irish, and Swedish. Oddly enough, I'm like, it was like a 27% or wild number like that of Swedish, and I was like, oh, this is new. Then it's like 16% Scottish and 13% Irish, and then like 1% Jewish European, like European Jewish, like from like Germany and like the Eastern European countries. So like Hungary, Bulgaria, all those places. So, and then I thought to myself, that would be a good talk if we talked about donors and cells and things of that nature. Now, a lot of memory transference in the donor aspect has not been 100% verified. But there's been cases. There's been a lot of cases, actually. And we're going to discuss some of those cases. And by all means, feel free to jump in. So we're going to start off with case one with Claire Sylvia. Now, on May 29th, 1988, a woman named Claire Sylvia received a heart transplant at a hospital in Yale, Connecticut. She was told that her donor was actually an 18-year-old male from Maine who died in a motorcycle accident. After the operation, she declared that she would like to have some beer. And she was never fond of it. It wasn't something she actually drank previous and prior, but all of a sudden she had a fondness for it. Also, she had an uncontrollable urge to want to eat chicken nuggets, and wanted to visit the popular restaurant chain KFC. She was like a healthy type of person, like a health nut, but she's craving these foods. And she also liked green peppers, but she never liked them before. And the odd thing here is she also starts having these reoccurring dreams about a mystery man named Tim, who she actually felt was the organ donor, and she had his heart. She ends up looking up some obituaries in the newspapers and finds that the person who did die was actually named Tim. And when she visited Tim's family, she discovered that he used to love chicken nuggets, green peppers, and beer. Now, doctors will sometimes say that it's part of the medicine, because when you get a transplant, there is drugs that you take so that the transplant takes, because sometimes the body will treat the organ like an intruder and will try to kill it in mass. So the treatment drugs kind of get the body used to the heart or the liver or whatever organ you are receiving from said individual. In some cases, they can actually take a piece of your like bone marrow or like a piece of an organ and grow it in a lab and grow you a new one. And a lot of times it aids in the process of not having to take those drugs because your body's already used to it. But sometimes even those don't take. So it's really just hit or miss.
That's why the big thing on stem cells is like, it's a big area of research right now, because stem cells are supposed to be some universal deal that can actually bridge that gap between what your body feels is natural and a donated organ, because it's like the base identifier between all of that. Now, I don't know a lot of the scientific in and out about it. I don't want to say a whole lot about it and come off like, oh, he knows what he's talking about. He's really smart. And I don't want to get it wrong. So, but that's basically why stem cells are so super important right now, because they're kind of like a universal bodily language almost to get this stuff to work together.
Yeah. And the thing is, DNA stores experiences, memories. A lot of doctors say that no, the organs don't store any information, that there's no memory to an organ, that the brain is the only part of the body that actually has a memory. But some doctors have gone on to say that the heart actually has its own brain as well. Excuse me. And that it is able to hold memories and thoughts and things like that. But if we really look at it as a whole and we look at our DNA, the DNA that is passed down from generation is what makes you who you are today. I think I found some like 438 relatives of mine. And I've gone back, my tree goes back to the 1500s. They would take it all the way back to the 1500s. And without one of those people, I wouldn't be here. So 438 people were together, and then I am the result of 438 people, more obviously, but as far as I go back, it's 438. I have relatives that fought in the Revolutionary War. I have relatives that fought for Britain before the Revolutionary War, and so it's really fascinating. But all of that DNA transfers down through the line. A lot of times the mother carries the bald gene, as they like to say. So if her father was bald, it usually skips a generation and then goes on. So if that's possible, if it is possible to have genetics, some people say I just have bad genetics. I had a buddy of mine say that a couple of days ago. If that's the case and genetics are a thing, a lot of people are can get cancer in different places, that other people can get. They have heart disease, they're at higher risk for blood pressure, so on and so forth. If that is the case, and if that can be proven, then why not memories? Why not experiences? DNA imprinting, like I've said, a lot of times these people, kids usually, they will have them on like Unsolved Mysteries or one of those other types of shows, and they'll along the lines say, I remember I was a fighter pilot in World War I and my plane crashed and I died, but I'm reborn in this body. I don't think that that's the case. I think that it's DNA imprinting. Somehow they're related to that person, whether it be a great grandfather or a great grandmother, or just you share that similarity in DNA makeup. So when the DNA is transferred, to your parents, transferred to you, you retain that. And I think a lot of times what we see is with those notions of, hey, I was this person back in 1912. The answer that I think would be the most viable would probably be the notion of DNA imprinting, that it passes down through the generations into you, mind you. Another example is, say your mom and dad don't like popcorn, but your grandfather loved it and you love it. So that is like a trait that was passed down to you, but it skipped a generation. Why wouldn't that be the case with DNA? Why couldn't memories, things like that, be stored in the heart, in the brain, in whatever? I don't know if they do brain transplants. I'm not 100%
Well,
sure on that.
it's
I
an
think they did
area
it
that
once.
they just started getting into it, and they've only had a few successes. And like the people didn't stay around for too long, but it was less because of the transplant and more for other health problems and things. But yeah, because they started doing whole head transplants, and they were pretty barbaric. Like this is like getting back into like the early days of transplant kind of stuff, and then they moved on to actually doing brain transplants, and I guess it's making progress. I don't know exactly. I know I read an article about it not too long ago myself. Um, but to kind of get back to the whole thing about DNA here really quick, this is actually something that I looked up to be ready for the show tonight. I was really kind of interested in this part of it, and because I think it's really viable that you can pass on information that way. And the reason I think that is because, and this is verified stuff too. This isn't just fringe theory, but they've discovered that DNA holds data.
Mhm.
Like, and I mean, it doesn't currently hold data like your hard drive in your computer, but it could if you used a half biological, like a biomechanical system to hold information. A strand of DNA, and this is what I found on multiple different places. So it's a kind of like a everybody backing each other up. A single strand of DNA can store 215 petabytes, which is 215 million gigabytes of information, which for people who might not be familiar with the wordage, that is a heck of a lot of data. Like that's more than any of your personal computers will ever hold. And if you think, oh yeah, I've got all this memory on my computer, like it's blows it out. It's like a fly compared to the Empire State Building. It's just a huge amount. And so they're working on ways to use DNA to store stuff. But when I hear that, I'm thinking it probably already does store this information. It's got hundreds of thousands of millions of years of humans being here encoded in it already. From the first humans that walked on the planet, or even before what they might have been before. If you listen to our show a lot, you might think, from Mars or wherever. All of that is still in all of our DNA somewhere in there. And it just gets added to. So it's super viable that you would pass on some of that within the family, and that every part of your body, even your fingers and toes, are going to have some kind of information stored there.
I mean, all we need to do is look at what's known as muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
Muscle memory being, like, for instance, I worked out for a while and then I stopped. Um, and then 6 months later, I started again, and my body, after a couple days, was right back on track. Like it never missed a beat. So if your muscles can store that type of memory, who's to say that you can't get memory from uh, your genealogy or memory from hearts? And
Mm-hmm.
the heart is a muscle, the biggest. It's one of the biggest. Um, but it's an organ, but it's also kind of like a muscle because it's pumping the blood. It's doing the work. It's like the main thing of your body. It does the work, pushing the blood, making that all do what it does. And so if that heart did that in that body, and that body knows to act a certain way because of the way the heart is, who's say taking that same heart, putting it in somebody else, that's not going to store the memory of that previous body into that? Because
Mm-hmm.
obviously the heart is in your chest, and it's all covered in, I don't know what that even be, but that heart would still have parts from the old body in it. And then when you put in the new body, you're just combining memories.
It's made from the old DNA. Like that heart is still going to have the original person's DNA, which again, there you go. Now you're getting that vast amount of information from a person who's had completely different experiences with that information. And now you're taking that into yourself. So makes sense to me.
Makes perfect sense. To give another example here, a 47-year-old male who worked at a foundry, he received the heart of a 17-year-old student. And after the operation, he discovers that he developed a fascination with classical music, and he thought that he didn't think much of it, but then he started, enjoying it more and more. Well, it turns out that the donor actually loved classical music and died hugging his violin case on his way to his violin class. Another one, an 8-year-old girl who received the heart of a murdered 10-year-old girl began having reoccurring vivid nightmares about the murder. Her mother then arranges a consultation with a psychiatrist who, after several sessions, concludes that she's witnessed an actual murder. They decided to call the police, who used the detailed descriptions of the murder, the time, the weapon, the place, the clothes he wore, and what the little girl he had killed had said to him, given by the little girl to find and convict the man in question. So here we have this, and it reminds me a lot of the case, and I forget the name of the person, but it was in West Virginia. It was one of the few cases where a ghost actually helped solve her own murder. And this is very similar, except it's that DNA, and she's having these dreams. Now, you can't explain that any other way. You can't say, well, it's the treatment drugs. No, because a lot of times when these donors donate their organs, the receiver doesn't know, if anything, about the donor. Like that information is private, because here's the donor, here's the doctor, and here's the patient. And that doctor is the buffer zone between that donor and that patient. And that doctor might not even know. But they probably do. The heart surgeons probably know who the donor was, make sure everything matches up. So who's to say? Especially a lot of times in traumatic and violent deaths, we have people say ghosts, right? That's how you make a ghost. You make a tragedy. Somebody dies. They're connected to this earth. They can't leave until they find peace. Who's to say it's not the same situation with that heart? Here's a 47-year-old man who got an 8-year-old girl who got a 10-year-old girl's heart. And the girl was murdered, but she was able to solve the case just based off of her own. Like, it sounds like straight out of a TV show, like an episode of Unsolved Mysteries, which it probably was. I don't know. But to think that actually solved a case, you have to wonder. I don't think you can really put it up as being anything other than the DNA imprinting on that heart.
And it definitely makes sense. I mean, I don't know any other way to explain it really, because otherwise you can say, oh, it's paranormal, it's something supernatural, it's the spirit of the last person. But that's, as much as we look into that kind of stuff and we enjoy that kind of stuff, we look for the scientific stuff first. And the science basically is saying that with DNA able to hold all this information already, why wouldn't you be able to transmit that? Why wouldn't the person receiving it get something from that? And it's the only explanation really that I think that makes sense in any case.
Yeah, it doesn't there's not really, like, even if they give you the drugs, how do the drugs have DNA imprinting on them? No.
It would be hallucination, and then it wouldn't be verifiable. You wouldn't be able to, like, because I know sometimes when you wake up from anesthesia, you're confused, you're out of it, that kind of stuff. Like, we had people when I worked at in a medical facility years and years and years ago, you would hear stories about, oh yes, this patient, they came out of anesthesia and they were angry and they punched a nurse and they did this and then that, and then they were felt bad about it afterwards, because that's not the kind of person they were. But the kind of anesthesia makes you kind of loopy like that. But I don't think it's going to transfer wholly accurate memories from an organ donor into your brain. I that seems more of a stretch. That's like jumping from one to the other. The DNA makes sense. The drugs don't. Unless somebody gave you suggestive drugs while they were doing the surgery and like, now remember, when you wake up, you're going to be remembering you love chicken wings. And, that'd be with this weird, sinister overtone. I mean, that might make a good movie. Somebody doing organ donations and then like suggesting things during your anesthesia. And then you go out and do Manchurian Candidate kind of stuff. But, I don't think that that's actually happening. I think, once again, DNA makes a lot more sense.
Well, here's some skeptical explanations that were put forth. One, the heart is a vital organ, and a new heart can breathe new power into the body to palpably change the personality. Well, in a way, yes, but change it to an old personality? You would think that if it's going to actually change a personality, it would change it into a new personality. And maybe it's new to that person, right? But it's still an old personality taking over. It's almost like if any of you've watched the show Yu-Gi-Oh, right? The main character, Yu-Gi-Moto, actually has a pharaoh that lives inside of him. It's a whole thing. But
it's one of the few things I actually know about that show.
He can literally turn into the pharaoh, which is an adult man, right? From a little boy to an adult man. And so that is how they explain that. Here's this little boy, but then he can turn into Pharaoh Atem. And you're like, all right. And there's a lot of like shows that have that sort of same concept of that being. So I don't know, like the idea that this heart can just all of a sudden put in it's new power, but that's the thing. You're not gonna be able to recall memories just because you get a new heart, and that's what it's doing. The next one here is these changes are due to drug reactions caused by the immune suppressants which are administered during organ transplants. Once again, that does not explain where that knowledge comes from. That doesn't explain I want chicken wings and beer. It doesn't explain that. If I was a health nut before and I didn't drink, I didn't do anything, but now all of a sudden I get the craving for that, and the person last also did that. Finally, heart transplant patients are being subconsciously influenced by the information provided or overheard during their hospital stay. Incidentally, this has been dubbed the hospital grapevine theory. Once again, just because you hear something in passing doesn't mean you're going to turn into that. It'd be pretty easy to fight, even subconsciously. It would be pretty easy to be like, no, that's not who I am. I don't really like these things. But the whole attitude shifts, like the personality shifts. And to me, that says DNA imprinting. That doesn't say, oh, I heard so-and-so talking about the next room, so that's who I must be now. And that doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't put the theory in good practice. Because by that, there'd be more people that would be like that. There'd be more people that would have these transplant memories, really, because, take it from one to the next. So they would have that. But there's not recorded cases of that happening. I think that's more just people overhear it and like, okay, but that's not him. Yeah, I got this transplant. Because the amount of people that this has happened to is a very small percentage compared to the population of those who have gotten a heart transplant. It's a very small part of the population, and we'll get to that in a bit. But some explanations, some alternative explanations. The first one we have is little brain in the heart. Now, in 1994, Dr. Armour introduced the concept of a functional heart brain. His analysis revealed that the heart has an intrinsic nervous system of its own, containing around 40,000 neurons called sensory neurites. The heart acts independently of the brain, sending and receiving meaningful messages of its own through I know I'm saying this wrong.
Autonomous nervous system.
It's not autonomous, autonomic.
Oh.
Autonomic nervous system. It is possible that this newly discovered center of intelligence is responsible for the memory transfer, which once again would make sense. The neuropeptide theory was proposed by pharmacologist Candace Pert, and she proposed that neuropeptides, which are stored in every cell, act as sort of a biochemical correlate of emotion. It was previously thought that emotions resided in the limbic system in the brain, but according to Pert, neuropeptides are protein-like messenger molecules released by the brain's neurons, which flow through the body, communicating among the nervous, immune, endocrine, muscular, and skeletal systems via blood, fluids, and central nervous system. At present, about 100 different peptides are known to be released by various populations of neurons in the mammalian brain, and neuropeptides have also been found in the heart, which could explain some forms of cellular memories reported by heart transplant patients. Next up, we have the magnetic field theory, and this one states that cells in the heart have a unique magnetic property and respond to and interact with magnetic fields. There may be an as yet undiscovered electromagnetic connection between the brain and heart, expressed in a form of energy that contains some level of cellular memory. Now, these last two are going to be a little more interesting because they delve more into the paranormal aspect of this. One of them being the unprepared spirit theory. And this one, like we talked about previous, psychic healers interviewed by Dr. Pearsall speculated that these experiences were caused by the donor's spirit was still attached to the earth and had not yet moved on to its higher world. So, and that would be interesting too, because a lot of times with the paranormal, a lot of folks will say, well, I'm helping them cross over. Like I'm aiding them in crossing over. But if they're staying, who's to say that it couldn't reside in the heart or in the kidneys or in the liver? I don't know what the memory of liver transplant patients or kidney transplant patients sits at. All I have is the heart data, which I mean makes sense. And who's to say that it's not going to do something of that nature? Finally, we have the psychometry theory, and some psychics suggest that the heart of the donor is actually an object, and it has psychic energy of the donor, much like a ring would, or anything that's actually carried by the owner itself. Now, biologist Lyle Watson suggests that physical items with which you have an intimate contact, once again, rings, can indeed take on our emotional fingerprints and store our thoughts and feelings. If plants and inanimate objects can store our feelings and thoughts, it is possible that our body organs, which are more intimately connected to us, also contain our emotional imprints. And these two, the last two explanations, the unprepared spirit and psychometry theory, are more aligned with occult insights, and that was offered by Sri Aurobindo and Mother on the nature of memory and the process of death. So if we look at these last two aspects, which quite fascinating, especially the idea that an object holds some form of energy. I know a lot of people will not have certain things in their house because they say it's cursed. You know, people will have Dubic boxes in their home and they won't open them because they think there's a malevolent spirit trapped in the box. If that's the case, who's to say that there's not some form of spirit, almost like a ghost in the shell type of thing, or a ghost in the machine type of thing, just sitting, waiting. And then when the transplant happens, those memories, those thoughts, those feelings from that last person are still there. That person can't move on because now they reside in they're almost trapped in another body.
And we've kind of talked about that as a possible explanation for hauntings in general. I mean, that's kind of been your view about, like, a haunted place is more the echo of a person rather than a person itself, which is a viable theory. It makes sense because, again, people are energy, everything distilled down to energy. You can't really predict what it's going to do. And so that kind of makes sense. If I'm looking at something that's a slightly less scientific, but also perhaps viable theory for something we just don't understand, that'd be more what I would go to. Because that makes sense to me. Think people will leave echoes in places. Like, you go to places in the world, you go to Auschwitz, you go to the closed down insane asylums. You go to these places, you feel the energy there, and there's just something not right about it. It makes you feel bad. It makes you almost feel sick sometimes, even
Yes.
when there's been hundreds of years that have passed in some places. And so we already know that something like that can happen, whether we can explain it with science or not. So that does kind of make sense that that an echo of a person could exist on a part of their body. I mean, they've lived with their
Yes.
body for however long their life was. It may have been short, it may have been long, but it was at least long enough to be like, yeah, this belonged to this person. And so it rubbed off a little bit. So that, if I wasn't going to accept the DNA theory, that'd be the next likely thing I would say.
I mean, yeah, you have to really look into it and take it. Well, what type of person is receiving it too? Because,
Mm.
like I said, it's a very small percentage of the overall donors or the overall recipients that receive these heart transplants. It's not something that's just every case is this person taking on the persona of person previous, but it makes you think, what if there's also been these transplants and the person does take some of that,
Mm.
that other person, but they don't tell nobody.
Mhm.
They don't say anything. They're not like, nah, people are going to think I'm crazy.
And they may not even realize it too. A lot of people, it might happen, and they might just be like, you know what? All of a sudden, I'm just really craving uh, Chinese food. I've never liked Chinese food before, but all of a sudden, I just love it. And the person that they got the organ from loved it, but maybe they don't know that. Maybe they didn't think to go follow up on that. It's just one of those things. They're just like, you know what? Maybe this is my new lease on life. Now I love Chinese food. And so there's probably a lot of unreported cases that are like that, of people who would just become a new person almost. And it's just, maybe the people around them might think, oh, it's weird, it's different, but nobody thinks too much about it because it doesn't, it's just one of those things that happens.
Right. No,
They
and
came through a life-saving surgery and all of a sudden they want to do this and this and this.
yes.
Oh, that's because you came through a life-saving surgery. Obviously, you're going to feel different about life. Well, maybe not, but, and that's their explanation.
And I mean, who hasn't tried new food? Like, man, I kind of want to try that.
Mhm.
And you didn't want to try it before, but you want to try it now. So I could understand if that was the case with something, like you said, life-changing surgery,
Mhm.
right? So a life-changing surgery, you're going to want to live life to the fullest. You're going to want to be like, well, I haven't tried this before, but I'm going to try it. But to have specific cravings for specific foods is a different animal altogether. So, I
Yeah.
mean, and go ahead, sorry.
A lot of it probably does get unreported. A lot of it probably just is like, oh, that's weird, but it's just one of those things. And so we focus on the cases that do get talked about, but it may be a lot more widespread than we think.
And we're not accounting for, people in other countries.
Yeah.
We're not accounting for that either. And excuse me.
Working man up late.
Yes. We're not accounting for that. And we're also not accounting for the type of person that has these experiences. Are they into the paranormal themselves? How are they unlike the other person that got the transplant and they're normal? They don't have any feelings, they don't have any inklings. They just, I got a heart, or I got a liver, or I got some kidneys, I'm good to go. But this person does. So where in the genetics are they able to sort of tap into that? Because there's got to be a way to tap into that DNA if it's just,
Mm-hmm.
fusing with your own, but giving you the memories of the person who had this organ previous and prior. Where do we? Because I think that would be the first thing you would have to look at is what kind of DNA is this person. Also, what DNA, what past do they have as opposed to what past does the donor have? Is there a link? Even if it's very high up in the family tree, what if there's a link somewhere? And that link is essentially how it bridges that gap, and now you're getting it, and you're getting those experiences from that person. And you have to wonder too that with people, like some people will get memories of their grandfathers that their grandfather's been dead for as long as they've been alive. He's not alive anymore, and they're able to hear, think, feel, see their grandfather, right, in dreams and things like that, but have never met him. How is that possible? It's the sharing of DNA. It has to be. Twins, supposedly there's a thing where if one twin gets hurt, the other twin will feel it. DNA, once again, linked. And that's like a wireless connection between two people. Like if you want to break it down in that form, it's a wireless connection. So one thing I do over one wire or over the connection could possibly affect the other operator on the other end of that wireless connection. And it's all DNA. It's all, like he said, DNA can store memory. So if that's the case, you should be able to retrieve the memory. If you could store it, it should be retrievable. And maybe your body has found a way to retrieve it. And that's how these recipients are able to have this connection, because their body has a way to retrieve it, as to where some other bodies don't. Other people can't retrieve it because they just don't have that system in place to be able to go in and say, okay, my microphone's gonna fall. They don't have that whatever it is that can say, okay, I'm gonna pull. I can pull literal information and store it in your body, and then your body's gonna change. That's the part that fascinates me. Is what do these people have, the recipients, that other folks don't? Where in the DNA does it connect? And is that connection the reason being? Like there's something special that connects the DNA together, and then in other cases, it just connects. It doesn't have a special thing, but this has a special thing. I think personally that DNA is a lot more powerful than we give it credit. That it has memories. I believe that your DNA has every single memory that your ancestors have ever had stored in it. And I think that things like deja vu are part of that. They're part of that aspect. Because I've had deja vu before. I've had it. And who's to say that your relative wasn't there at one point, at one time, and experienced that? I used to have deja vu about a barn on a road. My grandmother used to live on a road in the country, and there was apartment blocks set up. And across the street was this big plot of land. It was huge. They probably had maybe 100 acres. But there was a big barn. Gigantic barn. And I had a dream that I had went by there, had drove by there. And I knew the barn was there before, so obviously that could have been a part of it. But in the dream, I was driving. And I just happened to be driving and look over. And then one day I was driving, I look over, and that exact moment, it hit me. Oh, okay, I've done this before. I did this, I feel like I've done this before. A lot of people say that's a glitch in the matrix because people love to use the word matrix for every single thing.
It's a big buzzword these days.
And I don't think it these days. I think it has been since the movies come out.
Yeah.
I think everybody has at one point been like, man, living in the matrix, man. And there's a lot of, we could talk about that at some point too, of how this is all a simulation. I think we've had brief conversations about it. But once again, DNA. Yes, I had seen the place before, but I had never drove by it because I didn't have a car at the time. When I got a car, I drove by it, and something about it, and there's just odd things. I think our body is one giant hard drive, to be honest. If you think about it, if it can store, I mean, your body, first of all, your brain tells your ligaments to move. It moves your phalanges. I'm like, my brain is doing this. I'm doing it physically, but my brain is telling my fingers to move. So who's to say that DNA can't tell your brain something, and then your brain's like, new information. We're gonna do we're gonna add that in. Boom. Now you like chicken wings. Now you like beer. Now you like green peppers. Now you like classical music, and you didn't before. So like 2 examples is pretty sound. But then when you have multiple cases, and I just went over 2, I could have went over more. But I just went over 2. 3, actually. Sorry, 3, because of the murder that was committed. So 3 examples, and the doctors couldn't figure it out. I don't buy that whole, it's the drugs. How? How is the drugs? If that person has never heard of the donor, because that's usually kept confidential, never heard of the donor, didn't know anything about them, but know their name, what they ate, how they felt, and they're feeling that with this new organ, it would be safe to say that it's DNA imprinting. Once again, your DNA is fusing with other DNA. So now you have memories. You have memories that aren't yours.
You have like data upon data upon data upon data in your body. And there's so much stuff in your body that works automatically because of that data. Like, you don't have to think about digesting food. Your brain does that. Your brain tells your body to digest food. You don't have to think about breathing. When you stop, now that I've said that, and you stop and think about it, and all of a sudden you do have to think about it, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't think about breathing. I should start thinking about it. And then you kind of breathe on your own a little bit. It's a weird sensation.
It is.
But most of the time, you don't have to think about it because your body just does it. And it's all signals, and it's all things that happen automatic, and it takes data for that to happen. Just think of all the different complex equations that your body is running to make itself work on any given point, and not just collapse into like a big puddle on the floor, So, and we don't even know half of what the brain can do. Like, we're nowhere near figuring out what the brain is capable of. You always hear people doing new studies of, oh yeah, we figured out this part of the brain might be where depression comes from. This part might be where happiness comes from. This part might be where arithmetic is stored and all kinds of other stuff. But we don't know for sure, because the brain, which is one of the most important organs of our bodies, we don't even understand it. So there's so much that we just don't get.
And there's a lot of that. I think there's ways to unlock your DNA and to be able to pull from your ancestors' knowledge. I mean, Tesla talked about something called the universal consciousness that he could tap into. And I think what he meant was he was able to tap into his bloodline in some way and somehow was able to pull information from the ancient world to the present. Present being where he was at that moment, not today. But he found a way, and somehow he was able to use electricity to find that way. And he said that you can figure it out. He said you can find it, you can tap into it, and by tapping into it, you'll actually be able to do wonderful things. Like I said, I don't write off that we can. It's just how. It's all in how do you unlock it? How do you get the DNA aspect of your ancestors to flow through you? Because, I had this conversation with my dad and my son earlier. I'm the culmination of 438 people. 400, and that's all I know. There's way more, but 438 people. I am the culmination of all of those people. So who's to say that I can't somehow connect that DNA? Like I said, I'm made up of some crazy things. Who say I can't tap into that? There's got to be a way. There has to be a way.
Yeah. So We're getting close to the end. We've got about 8 minutes left.
Why don't you talk about phantom limbs, because we did not talk about that.
Phantom limb is another interesting thing too. It's kind of the opposite here, where instead of getting something new and then getting new memories from it, this one is getting memories from something that's not even there. And this is it's super common. Like people who have lost limbs in accidents or who've had to have them amputated, they will still be able to like lift their arm, and if their arm is gone from below the elbow, they can still feel their fingers moving. Like they can make their fingers move and everything like that, even if they don't have any fingers. It's because their body is telling them these are the nerves that your fingers would be connected to. And it's a constant struggle for people sometimes, like with legs and things, and their body's telling them, sure, you can do this thing, when physically they know they can't. They can look down and be like, I can't walk that way anymore because that leg is gone, or this arm is gone, or this is gone. And it's another interesting thing because their body is convinced, after having the limb for all of its life up until that point, that it's still there.
Yes.
It's on automatic. The brain is like, oh yeah, we automatically know that this is here, this is here, this is here, even when it's gone. So you take that and you reverse it, and you add something new to the mix that has been part of an entirely different system. It's like if you give somebody a new heart, that heart is still going to go on automatic, believing it's still controlling the body it was a part of.
Yes.
So it's going to send new signals to the brain, and the brain is going to have to be like, okay, sure, we'll do what you're telling me because you must know what you're doing. Blah, 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 blah. And so, again, that helps explain some of this stuff, some of this embedded memory, because your organs are so used to doing things from another system as they are.
Yes.
So super interesting stuff. Interesting stuff.
And your body itself has to acclimate to whatever organ you are receiving.
Mm-hmm.
And the acclimation process is tough because sometimes the organ does not cooperate with the rest of the body, so the body automatically goes into fight mode. It's sending the cells to go attack. It's setting them down there. You get rid of this thing. It's a foreign invader, and then they take drugs, and slowly the brain is like, okay, I can accept this. Oh, okay, now yes, you're part of us. But to me, I think a lot of people, like we said previous, don't come forward. Why would you? You'd be looked at as a crazy person in today's society, in a society where everybody wants this perfect proof of everything, of every single thing. When people say, unless I see proof, I don't believe it. Why would you come on and say, yeah, I had a heart transplant, now I'm having these feelings and thoughts of the person who died to give me this? I'm having those same thoughts that I know I am, and I was able to pull, to reach back into that person's family and talk to them. But we live in a society where it's not acceptable to not have an answer. It's not acceptable. You have to follow the science, as they'd like to say. But the problem is there's so many examples that following the science fails, because all you need is about 1,000 to 2,000 examples, and I'm sure there's more. I am sure there are many examples of this, but the fact that even if 5 people, right, had this happen to them, there's definitely cases I didn't talk about. There has to be something there, especially if they've never met, and we're talking to people on different sides of the globe. Come on now, it makes sense. And if we share DNA, all of us pretty much have the same basic chromosome. Some people don't, and that's cause for mental instability or mental disfigurement or physical disfigurement, things like that. But most people have the XY chromosome. They have the strands of DNA, and so we're all connected. We're all connected by DNA. And I think there's a way to tap into it. I don't know how, but I'm going to look into how to tap into that, because like I said, we come from the people who came before us. Everybody that is here right now, me, my co-host, Lee in the chat, everybody is the culmination of the people that came before them. There's got to be a way to tap into this, and I think we should do a. You know what? I'm gonna say that because some of y'all copy us, and then they'd be like, yeah, they want to copy. They'd be like, nobody listens to my show, so I'm just gonna copy them.
A lot
Truckers.
of copycats out there.
A lot of copycats took our style and ran with it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of y'all know who you are. You took our style and ran with it because you know we about that action. You know we're a fantastic podcast. We know that can't nobody do it like us. But y'all could try. Y'all could try. I'm not mad. It's flattering, honestly. You know, we start a podcast now. Everybody else will start a podcast. So. But it's all love. You know, there's no jealousy or hate behind that. There's no malice behind my words. Just give us credit. Just give us credit. You know, just come on, man. Little nudge, wink, wink, right? Little credit. We blessed y'all for 4 years now, almost 18, 19, 20, 21, almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years in August. We've been doing this. So
we're gonna have some kind of anniversary show, some kind of big special.
We should have a big special from somewhere big and special.
Yeah.
I like it. Have to save up a little bit of money. Maybe go somewhere cool like Waverly Hills or somewhere dope like that.
Yeah.
Go check that mug out. So
yeah.
But yeah, like I said, for the most part, I believe it's DNA imprinting. I mean, how else could you go about it? If the memory isn't there, people wouldn't have it. Unless every single case that I've read was faked. Why would they do that? Why would they put that self-doubt in of like, you're going to have some weird thoughts and feelings and you're going to be hungry for weird things? If the medical community does not want anything outrageous, because if it's outrageous, it disproves some things for those kind of folks. So you have to
status quo goes down the toilet and everything's like people get mad. People don't want to trust the establishment. And that's the whole point. All this stuff only functions if there is a trusted establishment. And if the last few years have told us anything, it tells us that there's a lot of problems with the current establishment one way or the other. Not going to say anything specific, not going to mention anything, just going to say a lot of authority figures are having to tread more carefully now.
As they should. As they should. But we're not gonna devolve into a diatribe about politics.
Let me just stop myself there.
We'll stop.
We'll wipe it away.
Just here's the key. Key's gone. It's in the Indian Ocean. So
with the tsunamis that altered the trajectory of the Earth.
That's from HARP.
Nah. There we go. Now people are going to start thinking, what?
They're going to be scribbling there like,
Stroking the beards like, I don't even have a beard.
They'll just get one of those fake ones. They'll look like Ramesses or one of the many Egyptian pharaohs.
Just sticking on.
Was it you that I had the discussion about the Egyptian pharaohs with?
No, I think that was either our buddy Mr. AJ Dean or Lawrence.
I'm trying to remember.
I think recently, because you had a talk with somebody about that recently, and you mentioned it. I don't remember which one of those guys did. You might have been with somebody else even though, but I think it was one of them.
Because I was talking about, we had a conversation about the pyramids.
Yeah.
And how we think the pharaohs were kept. Like, I think it was AJ, but we had a fantastic conversation about keeping. But it was really good. It was like, did they keep the pharaoh's organs here so that pharaoh would have to stay here and would give them counsel, so they would go to these places and seek counsel from somebody that was already dead but had ruled, so they kept their organs in jars so they couldn't leave.
Because the organs keep the DNA information, and maybe they knew that already. There we go. There's connection.
There it is. See how much we love y'all?
There we go. See?
There it is. Merry Christmas. Who's your best friend? That's right. Anyways, it's time to go. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So, as as always, from the This Uncanny Earth studios in Northeastern Ohio, I am Robert Solomon, and that is the ever living drunken spider. We will see you folks next week.